Okay, let's bring in some familiar faces to the show and some key players on this issue. Lana Payne is the Unifor National President. Flavio Volpe is the President of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. And here with me in studio, Brian Kingston, President and CEO of the Canadian Motor Vehicle Manufacturers Association. It's good to see you all. Thank you for being here. Lana Payne, I'd like to start with you if I could. We just heard from some of your members who are facing deep uncertainty. As of 5 o'clock Eastern, how many of your members are facing job losses, and how much worse could it get?
Oh, David, the Windsor Assembly Plant employs several thousand people. They're all going to be on downtime over the coming weeks. And we have several thousand in the supply chain in the auto parts industry that support that plant. This is devastating, but at the same time, I think we can all say that we knew we were headed for this. All three of us that you have here today have been saying that this industry would not be able to survive the kind of disruption that we're seeing with these tariffs, and that it would have drastic impacts. And I expect this is not the last announcement we're going to see in the coming days and weeks.
Flavio Volpe, you had suggested at one point in one of our many conversations about this trade war that the whole North American auto sector could shut down within a week if things got too bad. What's your diagnosis of where things stand as of right now?
Well, this isn't the only plant that we saw shut down today. We saw Stellantis Toluca plant shut down today. This is a world-class automaker in a world-class plant with a highly productive workforce, with two new products in a retooled plant in the first term of their product launch. Closing for 2 weeks in April is not normal. A few people may tell you that. The same thing with their plant in Toluca. Lana touched on it. There's 7,000 to 10,000 people that work for part suppliers on both sides of the Detroit River that will have tools down over the next 2 weeks at least here. And not because the people at Stellantis don't want to make cars. It's because there's a tariff that is 4 times the size of their profit margin and the profit margin of their suppliers. And Stellantis doesn't make cars differently than everybody else. Everybody is facing the same real tough questions of how long do we go with this before we get a remedy to this? And none of us, I think on this panel here, want to see anybody shut down. But we're also not naive. We're at least trained in basic math. We know that if something costs more than you could sell it for, you're not going to do it for a long time. Right. And the anxiety that those workers speak with is anxiety that every worker at every auto parts plant that I represent is speaking with as well. And there's only one person who can turn this thing around, and it doesn't sound like he wants to.
So Brian Kingston, how do the vehicle manufacturers view the situation as of today?
Well, this is what happens when you design trade policy basically on an Etch-a-Sketch. It's unsophisticated and it changes every moment. Auto manufacturers have a long time horizon for their investments. When they build a plant, they need to have certainty that the investment environment, the trade rules, the regulatory environment will be maintained. Overnight, that has been thrown into disarray. And what's so disappointing about all of this is that just last week when we were speaking, the industry was outlining what the impacts of these tariffs would be. Costs will go up through the supply chain. Demand will go down as consumers will not have the ability to go out and buy vehicles, and ultimately production will slow. This has been laid out, it has been made crystal clear to the administration, and they had proceeded with this policy anyway. So what we're seeing today is this playing out in real time. This is what happens when you put in place massive tax increases on businesses across the board.
The impression I've had, Brian Kingston, though, about your sector from our many conversations, the four of us in various moments of this trade war, is that this will be almost like a contagion, that it starts with one plant, then a second, then a third, then a fourth, and it just keeps going. I mean, how long can it stay operational, given what Donald Trump has done to the profit margin and the economics of the current business?
The timeline is not encouraging because the cost increases are so significant. And what has been added to the auto tariffs, which are devastating in their own right, yesterday the Americans put tariffs on countries around the world. The automotive industry is global in nature. If you think about some of the components, the electronics, semiconductors, some of the battery components, those are coming from countries all over the world. So not only are auto manufacturers dealing with these 25% tariffs and disruption to the North American supply chain, they now have to find a way to bring in all of these components from other countries at much greater cost. So that is compounding an already extremely challenging situation, makes it very hard to operate.
Right, so Lana Payne, some of the analysis we've seen is this could trigger, if not a global recession, at minimum a global slowdown, and this is all a policy of choice by the president. You've got thousands of workers in Windsor worried. The federal government has said today that they're going to hit back with counter tariffs on about $36 billion worth of goods, $8 billion in revenue from those counter tariffs, all of it going to support workers and people affected by this. I mean, is that even enough at this point, given the size and scale of what could potentially happen here?
Well, a couple of things right now. I would say that what the Prime Minister did today was very important. Canada cannot roll over here. We have to send the kind of message that we have, and we have to be strong for the rest of the world, because the rest of the world's going to have to respond. The reality is that, you know, this $8 billion or whatever it ends up being can go to support auto workers. It can also go to support investment in auto facilities and the supply chain. I'd love to see that. But the other thing is the message that the Prime Minister sent is that you are free from these tariffs if you keep your production in Canada. And that also is incredibly important, because that is how we protect these facilities and this footprint as we make our way through this trade war. And that was a critical piece of what the Prime Minister did today.
But so Flavio Volpe, I saw you react to that in a positive way, but you know, some of the pushback we've heard is that the Canadian market just isn't large enough to sustain an auto sector of its current scale. I mean, what can you realistically do with that sort of tariff relief for Canadian manufacturers that the Prime Minister highlighted today? What does that mean in terms of keeping jobs and plants going?
You can't keep up long term. But Lana's absolutely right. The reason I said yes, Lana and I sat in a meeting where I heard Lana make that suggestion to the Prime Minister. So Lana's saying this is a very good move, but I also want to point out that that means the Prime Minister and his team are listening. And we need to fight back. Hard to argue with the math that they can outpace us, but they've picked on the entire world. And for us, I think what we've always said is, look, when the bully is stepping on your neck, what do? Do you say thank you, or do you bite the ankle? At some point here, you have to fight back. I thought what we did today was measured. We said, okay, now we're going to put tariffs on American cars being imported into Canada, and we'll zero out Canadian parts content that are in USMCA compliant vehicles, and we will return any tariffs that we collect here to companies that commit to making cars here, including the one that had to shut down in Windsor, but the ones that are in all the other towns here up and down the 401 corridor that are nervous, and the suppliers are nervous, and their workers are nervous. We need to fight back, because the alternative is you've lost.
Right. So Brian Kingston, we've seen the offer of tariff relief, the offer of support for people using the revenue collected from tariffs. We've also seen the New Democrats and the Conservatives pitch a GST holiday on the purchases of Canadian-made cars. I mean, that's not going to offset everything. How valuable is something like that? How many cars could that maybe affect in a given year?
Of course, it's not going to offset the fact that majority of our production goes into the United States. That's the foundation of the industry. That said, it is encouraging to see other parties out there putting forward proposals like this, trying to find a way to keep production levels increased or at least maintained in Canada. So I was happy to see the GST relief for Canadian vehicles. If you look at the market in Canada last year, about 10% of total vehicles registered were built in Canada. So, 1 in 10, it's not bad. It definitely will help. But just to, I think the big important announcement today really was, and Atlanta outlined this remissions program that the Prime Minister has discussed is going to be critically important, because the manufacturers are under fire. the last thing we should do is then wipe out their potential to sell vehicles in Canada. So we've got to get that right. And I think that will help maintain the footprint, and then other things like we've heard parties announce will also be helpful.
So if they don't buckle to the pressure of the Trump administration and relocate their production, they escape this and can keep functioning as best they can, is essentially how it would work for them.
This is exactly it. And, I can't believe, frankly, that we're even discussing these types of proposals. This is pre-auto pact type policies. But in the environment that we were in, we don't have much of a choice. And at the end of the day, we all want to maintain the footprint. 130,000 good direct jobs from this industry and many more through the supply chain. We have to do everything possible to maintain that and fight for that.
So Lana Payne, I know on that is an issue you are acutely worried about, right? Is that the pressure on the manufacturers compels them to relocate south of the border, or if there's a redundancy in the supply chain that they can make a part in the U.S. and make it in Canada, they'll just pivot entirely to U.S. production. This measure helps. I mean, what else needs to be done to convince those companies sort of not to give up on Canada?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what I spend my days doing, is talking to them about not giving up on Canada. But I think the reality is that what the Prime Minister has done here is actually, and not just because he took some of my advice, but is smart. It is about how we get through this trade war. It is about now also turning our minds to how we build this industry going forward, including the supply chain, including making sure that we're proofing ourselves against as much of these shocks as we can. But at the same time, we have to work our way through what these tariffs are doing. And the reality is that we're not alone now. That Flavio said this, the whole world is with us because everybody has been attacked by the Trump administration, which helps us have a collective in terms of how the global world can push back right now. And Canada has been leading the way, and we're going to have to keep doing that.
Yeah, look, Flavio Volpe, if you're an American right now, nearing your retirement, counting on your 401k, the stock market, the Standard & Poor's alone, the S&P 500, it lost over $2.4 trillion today. But despite all of that, you heard what Mark Carney said today, that this is not going to be short term. This is going to be a long haul, it seems, because there is no sign of the president backing away from this in spite of all the data and all of the economic self-harm that's happening here. So, I mean, what's the horizon before real, and I'm not minimizing what happened in Windsor today by any stretch of the imagination, but before that, the more dominoes start to fall in real substantial numbers beyond a 2 weeks shutdown?
Look, S&P Global and Cox Automotive, Wedbush Advisory, there's a whole bunch of organizations that have an incredible infrastructure, thousands of people crunching numbers. They all say 1 or 2 weeks. Now, I'm sure that the Trump administration reads those same reports and probably trying to mitigate some of those by delaying tariffs on auto parts until May the 3rd. But the market is a really good test of whether he truly has all the best people, or whether he went through them in the first term that he was in office. And today the market said, you guys are dummies, and you've hurt Americans first. And the markets are relentless. They open again tomorrow. And those markets will also dictate some of the reactions in some of the auto capitalists. As you try to tough this thing out and try to mitigate the crisis, if the market loses confidence in you, you're going to have to make tough decisions like Stellantis did. I wish that we weren't having this conversation. I really do hope that we figure it out, because the companies that I represent rely on those volumes. But every time you book a day of production with a 25% tax on that production, and you've made 6%, you're booking a 18% loss, and that's dumb too.
So Brian Kingston, on that, I mean, the data, the markets, the jobs, I mean, 1,000+ Americans have lost their jobs too as a result of this. But, Donald Trump remains a 78-year-old man who cannot seek re-election. So there's a concern that he has kind of nothing to lose politically. So I mean, where do you see the pain point being with the United States that can move him off this?
It's the economy. It's all about the economy. And look, they may try and sustain this policy for a few days, but I continue to believe that the U.S. is now potentially going to go into recession. we're going to see vehicle prices going up between $4,700 and $10,000 US. You will see unemployment, you will see production stoppages. I don't believe that the American consumer and the American voter has signed up for that. And it may take some time to realize how bad this damage will be, but when you go to buy a new car in the United States and you either can't find one or you're being asked to spend $10,000 more, I think we're going to see a pushback. It will be the markets, it will be the economy that disciplines this type of policy.
So Lana Payne, last word to you on what the Prime Minister said today, that this won't be short. It's going to require sacrifices and it's going to hurt. I mean, how bad a scenario are you bracing for right now, given the way the President and his people seem to have dug in?
I can't articulate it, David, because that's the stuff that keeps me awake at night. We've had an auto industry in this country for over 100 years, and we have to fight to keep it here for 100 more. There is a lot at stake, and we are at risk of losing it. That is why the actions that the Prime Minister took today were so incredibly important. And we have to remember that we have tariffs coming down the pipe on a whole bunch of other parts of our economy where we also represent workers. So we're going to have a hell of a fight on our hands, but now Canada is in a position to do it.
Okay. Look, I want to thank you all for being so available with information and with your time throughout the course of this. Lana Payne, Flavio Volpe, and Brian Kingston, we always appreciate it. We're going to take a break, but later this hour, the Power Panel is going to join me to react to